My name is Karen, and at 58 years old, I thought I understood family dynamics pretty well. Last month, I spent weeks planning what I believed would be a perfect anniversary celebration for my son and daughter-in-law. The dining room was decorated with soft golden lights, the table set with our finest china, and I had even hired a photographer to capture the precious moments. I was so proud, so hopeful that this evening would finally bring our family closer together. But I never could have imagined that my daughter-in-law's toast would expose years of hidden resentment, or that my response would leave every single guest speechless. Before we dive into this story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life family stories. Trust me, you won't believe what happened when I finally decided to stand up for myself. To truly understand what happened that night, I need to take you back 6 years to when David first brought Ashley home for dinner. My son had always been such a sweet boy, the kind who called his mother every Sunday without fail and never forgot a birthday or anniversary. When he was growing up, we were incredibly close. He would sit at the kitchen counter doing homework while I cooked, telling me about his day at school, his dreams, his fears. We had that special bond that only mothers and sons can share. So when David called to say he was bringing someone special home for dinner, my heart practically burst with joy. I spent the entire day preparing his favorite meal pot roast with mashed potatoes and green beans, the same recipe my mother had taught me 40 years earlier. Harold helped me set the table with our wedding china, and we even bought fresh flowers for the centerpiece. Ashley walked through our front door that evening, looking absolutely stunning. She had long auburn hair that caught the light beautifully, and she wore a simple blue dress that complemented her complexion perfectly. But there was something in her eyes, a coolness that I noticed immediately. When I hugged her hello, she felt stiff in my arms, like she was merely tolerating the embrace rather than welcoming it. During dinner, I asked her about her job at the marketing firm, her family, her hobbies. She answered politely enough, but her responses were brief, almost mechanical. When I offered to share my grandmother's secret recipe for apple pie, something I had only shared with 2 other people in my entire life, Ashley simply smiled and said, "That's nice, but I don't really bake." David sat between us, beaming with happiness, completely oblivious to the subtle tension I could feel building. He kept reaching over to squeeze Ashley's hand, looking at her like she had hung the moon and stars just for him. And I wanted so desperately to love her the way he did, to welcome her into our family with open arms. Over the following months, I made every effort imaginable to connect with Ashley. I invited her to go shopping at the outlets, thinking we could spend time together choosing things for their new apartment. She declined, saying she preferred shopping alone. I offered to teach her how to make David's favorite chocolate chip cookies, the ones he had been asking for since he was 7 years old. Again, she politely refused, explaining that she was watching her sugar intake. Every Sunday dinner invitation was met with an excuse. She had to work late, she wasn't feeling well, they had other plans. Yet somehow her social media was always filled with photos of her out with friends at restaurants, at parties, living what appeared to be a very active social life that somehow never included me. Harold would find me in the kitchen after these rejected invitations, gently rubbing my shoulders as I stood at the sink, trying to hide my disappointment. "Give her time, sweetheart," he would say in that patient voice he had perfected over 35 years of marriage. "Some people just need longer to warm up. She'll come around." But months turned into years, and Ashley never did warm up. If anything, she seemed to grow more distant. During family gatherings, she would sit quietly in the corner, scrolling through her phone or whispering with David about things that apparently couldn't be shared with the rest of us. When I tried to include her in conversations about wedding planning or their future together, she would give me that same polite smile and change the subject. The most painful moment came during their wedding planning. I had offered to help with anything they needed, whether it was addressing invitations, making centerpieces, or coordinating with vendors. Ashley's response was swift and clear. "Thank you, but we prefer to handle everything ourselves." Yet somehow her own mother was intimately involved in every decision, from choosing the flowers to selecting the menu. When David and Ashley's 5th wedding anniversary approached, I saw it as the perfect opportunity to show them both how much their marriage meant to me, how proud I was of the life they had built together. Despite years of feeling somewhat excluded from their lives, I genuinely wanted to celebrate their love and commitment. Perhaps I thought this gesture would finally bridge the gap that seemed to exist between Ashley and me. I started planning 2 months in advance, determined to make this celebration absolutely perfect. I called Rosewood Manor the most elegant venue in our area and reserved their private dining room for 24 guests. The room featured floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a beautiful garden, and I knew Ashley loved flowers and natural light. The cost was significant, nearly $800 just for the room rental, but I considered it an investment in our family's happiness. Next came the menu selection. I spent hours researching Ashley's preferences, even calling David to ask about her favorite foods, without revealing why I needed to know. I learned that she preferred salmon over beef, loved roasted vegetables, and had recently developed an appreciation for craft cocktails. I worked with the chef to create a 3-course meal that would reflect her tastes, perfectly complete with a signature drink made with elderflower and champagne. The guest list required careful consideration. I included David and Ashley's closest friends, colleagues from both of their workplaces, and family members from both sides. I hand-wrote each invitation on cream-colored cardstock, taking care to make my penmanship as elegant as possible. When I called Ashley to discuss the invitation list, she seemed surprised by the gesture, but agreed to the guest selection without much enthusiasm. For 3 weeks, I worked on a slideshow presentation that would showcase their relationship journey. I gathered photos from their engagement party, their wedding day, various vacations, and casual moments that David had shared with us over the years. I arranged them chronologically, added soft background music, and included quotes about love and marriage that I thought would resonate with the couple and their guests. The gift required the most thought of all. I decided to create a custom photo album that told the story of David's life from childhood through his marriage to Ashley. I spent days organizing pictures, writing captions, and designing pages that would capture precious memories. I included photos of David as a baby, his first day of school, his graduation from college, and finally his wedding day. On the last page, I left space for future family photos, hoping that someday there might be grandchildren to add to our family story. Shopping for the perfect outfit consumed an entire Saturday. I visited 4 different boutiques before finding a navy blue dress that struck the right balance between celebratory and appropriate for my role as mother of the groom. I even splurged on new shoes and had my hair professionally styled the morning of the party. Harold supported every aspect of my planning, even though I could tell he was concerned about my level of investment in an event that Ashley seemed ambivalent about. He helped me proofread the invitations, offered suggestions for the slideshow, and drove me to the venue twice for planning meetings. The night before the party, as I laid out my outfit and rehearsed the welcome speech I planned to give, he sat on the edge of our bed and said, "I hope this goes the way you're imagining it, Karen. You've put so much love into this celebration." I fell asleep that night, filled with anticipation and hope, dreaming of a perfect evening that would finally bring our family together in the way I had always envisioned. The evening of the anniversary party arrived with perfect weather and an atmosphere charged with anticipation. I arrived at Rosewood Manor 2 hours early to oversee the final preparations, ensuring that every detail met my exacting standards. The florist had created stunning centerpieces featuring white roses and eucalyptus exactly as I had requested, and the soft lighting created an intimate ambiance that felt both elegant and welcoming. Guests began arriving at 6:30 each one, commenting on the beauty of the venue and the thoughtfulness of the celebration. David's college friends, whom I had not seen in several years, greeted me with warm hugs and genuine appreciation for organizing such a lovely event. Ashley's co-workers, whom I was meeting for the first time, seemed impressed by the attention to detail and the obvious care that had gone into every aspect of the evening. David and Ashley arrived fashionably late, just as I had expected they would. David looked handsome in a charcoal gray suit that brought out his blue eyes, and he immediately came over to embrace me, whispering, "Thank you, Mom," in my ear, with such genuine gratitude that my eyes filled with tears of joy. Ashley wore a stunning emerald green dress that complemented her auburn hair beautifully, and I made sure to tell her how lovely she looked, even though her smile in response felt somewhat forced. As dinner was served, I found myself moving from table to table, ensuring that everyone felt comfortable and included in the celebration. I shared stories about David's childhood with guests who had never heard them, describing his determination to learn how to ride a bicycle without training wheels and his proud announcement at age 6 that he would someday marry a princess. The guests laughed warmly at these anecdotes, and I felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that I was helping to create precious memories for everyone present. However, as the evening progressed, I began to notice subtle signs that something was amiss. Ashley remained seated at the head table throughout most of dinner, rarely engaging in conversation with the guests around her. When people approached her to offer congratulations or share their own stories about marriage, she responded politely but briefly, never allowing conversations to develop into meaningful exchanges. Most concerning was Ashley's behavior with her phone. Despite being the guest of honor at her own anniversary celebration, she spent considerable time texting, occasionally showing her screen to one of her friends and sharing quiet conversations that seemed to exclude everyone else at the table. When I caught her eye and smiled encouragingly, she would look away quickly, as if she had been caught doing something she shouldn't have been doing. David, bless his heart, was working overtime to include Ashley in every conversation and to bridge any awkward moments that arose. When someone asked about their future plans, he would look to Ashley expectantly, but she would simply shrug and let him answer for both of them. When the photographer I had hired approached their table for candid shots, Ashley's smile appeared strained and uncomfortable, nothing like the radiant joy I had hoped to capture. The most telling moment came during the slideshow presentation. As photos of their courtship and wedding appeared on the screen, accompanied by the romantic music I had carefully selected, I watched Ashley's face for signs of the happiness and nostalgia I had expected to see. Instead, she seemed almost bored, occasionally glancing at her watch and shifting restlessly in her chair. Despite these concerning observations, I remained optimistic that the evening would end on a positive note. I had planned for both David and Ashley to offer toasts to their guests, thanking everyone for sharing in their celebration. David had already confirmed that he would speak, and Ashley had agreed, albeit somewhat reluctantly, to say a few words as well. As we moved into the final portion of the evening, I felt confident that my months of planning and attention to detail had created a beautiful celebration that honored their marriage appropriately. I had no way of knowing that Ashley's toast would shatter that confidence completely and change our family dynamic forever. The moment for toasts arrived as dessert was being served, a delicate tiramisu that I had selected specifically because Ashley had once mentioned enjoying Italian food. David stood first, looking handsome and confident as he raised his champagne glass to address our 24 guests. The room fell into an expectant silence, and I felt my heart swell with pride as I watched my son prepare to speak. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight to celebrate 5 amazing years of marriage with Ashley and me. David began, his voice strong and clear. This beautiful evening wouldn't have been possible without my incredible mother, Karen, who has spent months planning every detail to make tonight special for us. He turned toward me with that brilliant smile that had melted my heart since he was a toddler, and I felt tears of happiness gathering in my eyes. David continued speaking eloquently about the journey he and Ashley had shared, the challenges they had overcome together, and his excitement about their future. He thanked his father Harold for teaching him how to be a good husband, and he expressed genuine gratitude for the love and support of family and friends. His words were heartfelt and appropriate, exactly what I had hoped to hear from my son on such a meaningful occasion. The guests applauded enthusiastically when David finished, and several people wiped away tears of their own. The atmosphere in the room was warm and celebratory, filled with the kind of love and joy that makes family gatherings truly special. I was practically glowing with happiness as David sat down and Ashley stood to take her turn at the microphone. Ashley looked absolutely beautiful as she rose from her chair, her emerald dress catching the soft lighting perfectly. She held her champagne glass delicately and smiled at the assembled guests, appearing every inch the gracious hostess I had always hoped she would become. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe that her words would match David's in their warmth and appreciation. "Thank you all so much for being here tonight." Ashley began, her voice sweet and melodious. "David and I are truly touched by your presence at our anniversary celebration. These 5 years have been an incredible journey, and we've learned so much about love, commitment, and what it means to build a life together. So far, her words were perfectly appropriate, and I found myself relaxing slightly, thinking that perhaps I had been reading too much into her earlier behavior. Maybe Ashley was simply nervous about speaking in front of a large group, and her apparent discomfort had nothing to do with any feelings toward me or our family. But then Ashley's tone shifted almost imperceptibly, and I noticed a subtle change in her expression that made my stomach clench with sudden apprehension. "I especially want to talk about my mother-in-law, Karen," she continued, turning to look directly at me with a smile that no longer seemed genuine. "These 5 years have taught me so much about what it means to be part of a family, and Karen has been such an educational experience." A few guests chuckled politely, assuming Ashley was leading up to heartfelt thanks for my efforts in organizing the celebration. But something in her tone made me sit up straighter in my chair, a growing sense of unease spreading through my chest like ice water. "Karen has shown me exactly what it means to be a dedicated mother-in-law," Ashley continued, her voice taking on an edge that I don't think anyone else noticed yet. "She's taught me about the importance of having opinions about everything from how we decorate our home to what we serve at dinner parties. She's demonstrated the value of constant communication calling to check on us multiple times each week to make sure we're making appropriate choices." Now I was certain that Ashley was not building toward genuine gratitude, and the blood began to pound in my ears as I realized what was happening. Harold must have sensed my distress because I felt his hand slip over mine under the table, squeezing gently in a gesture of support and warning. "Most importantly," Ashley said, her smile becoming sharper and more pronounced, "Karen has taught me that when you truly love someone, you make sure they know exactly how they should be living their lives. Because nothing says, 'I care about you,' quite like helpful suggestions about career choices, lifestyle decisions, and personal boundaries." The room had grown uncomfortably quiet now, with several guests exchanging uncertain glances as they began to realize that Ashley's toast was not following the expected script for such occasions. I felt my face burning with humiliation and shock, unable to believe that Ashley was using this moment, this celebration I had worked so hard to create, as an opportunity to publicly humiliate me. Ashley raised her champagne glass higher and concluded with words that hit me like physical blows. "So here's to Karen, who has shown me that the best way to welcome someone into your family is to make sure they never forget who really knows best. Thank you for teaching me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to let people know that their independence is really just an illusion. Cheers to 5 more years of learning to appreciate guidance." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the clinking of Ashley's glass as she took a sip of champagne and sat down with obvious satisfaction. The silence in the room was so complete that I could hear the soft jazz music still playing in the background, a stark contrast to the emotional bomb that Ashley had just detonated in the middle of our celebration. Every pair of eyes in the room seemed to be looking between Ashley and me, waiting to see how I would respond to what had just occurred. My hands were trembling so violently that I had to set down my champagne glass to prevent it from shattering. Harold leaned closer to me and whispered urgently, "Karen, breathe. Don't let her see how much this affected you." But it was too late for that. I could feel my face flushing red with a combination of humiliation, anger, and disbelief that Ashley had chosen this moment in front of all these people to air whatever grievances she had been harboring against me. David looked absolutely stricken, his face pale and his mouth hanging open as he stared at his wife in obvious shock. I could see him struggling to process what had just happened, torn between defending his mother and supporting his wife. Several of the guests had begun whispering among themselves, clearly uncomfortable with the unexpected turn the evening had taken. But as I sat there absorbing the full impact of Ashley's words, something inside me shifted. The hurt and embarrassment I felt began transforming into something else entirely, a cold, clear anger that cut through my emotional confusion like a blade. For 5 years, I had made excuse after excuse for Ashley's behavior. I had told myself that she was shy, that she needed time, that she was still adjusting to being part of our family. Now I understood that none of those explanations had been true. Ashley didn't dislike me because I was overbearing or controlling. She disliked me because I existed because I represented a connection between her and David that she couldn't control or eliminate. Every kindness I had offered, every invitation I had extended, every gesture of love I had made had been interpreted as an intrusion rather than an expression of genuine care. I stood up slowly, feeling every eye in the room focus on me with laser intensity. My legs felt unsteady, but my resolve was growing stronger with each passing second. I walked around the table to where Ashley sat, still looking pleased with herself, apparently believing that she had delivered some sort of devastating final blow to our relationship. "Ashley," I said quietly, extending my hand toward the microphone she had placed on the table beside her plate. "May I have that for a moment, please?" She looked surprised by my calm tone, probably expecting me to burst into tears or flee the room in embarrassment. But she handed over the microphone, and I saw a flicker of uncertainty cross her face as she realized that I wasn't reacting the way she had anticipated. I walked to the center of the room, the same spot where Ashley had just delivered her character assassination, and looked out at the faces of people I had invited to celebrate what I thought was a happy occasion. Some of them looked sympathetic, others appeared curious about what would happen next, and a few seemed genuinely angry on my behalf. "Thank you, Ashley, for that very illuminating perspective on our relationship." I began, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I think it's only fair that everyone here gets to hear the complete story, don't you think? After all, if we're going to air family grievances in public, we might as well be thorough about it." I saw Ashley's confident expression begin to falter as she realized that I wasn't going to simply accept her public humiliation quietly. David started to stand up, probably intending to intervene, but I held up my hand to stop him. "Please let me finish," I said firmly. "I think it's important that everyone understands exactly what kind of controlling behavior Ashley has been subjected to over these past 5 years." I took a deep breath and looked directly at Ashley as I began to speak, making sure my voice carried to every corner of the room. 6 years ago, when David first brought Ashley home for dinner, I was absolutely thrilled. I had waited so long for my son to find someone special, and I wanted nothing more than to welcome her into our family with open arms. I turned to address the guests more directly, noting that several of them were leaning forward with obvious interest. That first evening, I spent the entire day cooking David's favorite meal, setting the table with our wedding china, and preparing to treat Ashley like the daughter I had always hoped to have. But when I offered to share my grandmother's secret apple pie recipe, something I had only shared with 2 other people in my entire life, Ashley told me she didn't bake. A few of the guests nodded knowingly, beginning to understand where my story was heading. I continued feeling my confidence grow with each word. Over the following months, I invited Ashley to go shopping together, thinking we could bond while choosing things for their new apartment. She declined, preferring to shop alone. I offered to teach her how to make David's favorite chocolate chip cookies, the ones he had been asking for since he was 7 years old. Again, she wasn't interested. Every Sunday dinner invitation was met with an excuse about work, feeling unwell, or having other plans. I paused to let this information sink in before delivering the more damaging details I had been keeping to myself for years. What Ashley didn't know was that I heard about her real feelings through a mutual friend who attended the same yoga class. According to this friend, Ashley had been telling people that David's family was suffocating and old-fashioned, and that she was having trouble dealing with a mother-in-law who couldn't mind her own business. I saw Ashley's face go pale as she realized that her private conversations had not been as private as she had believed. David turned to look at his wife with an expression of hurt confusion, clearly hearing this information for the first time. But I kept trying. I continued, my voice growing stronger. When Ashley got food poisoning last spring and David had to work, I brought over homemade soup ginger tea and offered to stay and take care of her. She accepted the soup, but told David later that I had invaded her space when she was feeling vulnerable. Several guests gasped quietly at this revelation, and I could see understanding dawn on their faces as they began to piece together the real dynamic between Ashley and me. When they were planning their wedding, I offered to help with anything they needed. Ashley's response was that they preferred to handle everything themselves. Yet somehow, Ashley's mother was intimately involved in every decision from choosing the flowers to selecting the menu. I wasn't even consulted about family traditions that might be meaningful to include in their ceremony. I looked around the room at faces that were now showing clear sympathy for my position, and I felt validated in a way that I hadn't experienced in years. Every phone call I made to check on their well-being was treated as an intrusion. Every invitation to family gatherings was met with reluctance. Every gesture of love and support was interpreted as an attempt to control their lives. And through it all, I kept telling myself that Ashley just needed time, that she would eventually understand that I only wanted what was best for both of them. Now I turned back to face Ashley, directly noting that she was no longer looking pleased with herself, but instead appeared genuinely shaken by having her behavior exposed so publicly. "But tonight, Ashley, you've made something very clear to me. You don't want a relationship with me at all. You want me to disappear from David's life entirely so that you can have him all to yourself without any reminders that he had a family who loved him before you came along." The room was absolutely silent now, hanging on every word I spoke. "Well, congratulations, Ashley. You've finally gotten what you wanted. From this moment forward, you won't have to worry about my controlling behavior anymore because I'm done trying to be part of your life." I felt a strange sense of liberation as I continued speaking, finally able to express years of accumulated hurt and frustration in front of witnesses who could see the truth of the situation for themselves. "You want boundaries, Ashley. You're going to get more boundaries than you ever imagined possible." I turned to address the entire room, making sure everyone could hear my next words clearly. "From tomorrow morning forward, there will be no more weekly phone calls to check on how you're doing. No more invitations to Sunday dinner that you can decline with obviously fabricated excuses. No more offers to help with anything in your life, whether it's moving furniture, pet sitting while you're on vacation, or celebrating important milestones." Ashley had gone completely white now, and I could see that she was beginning to understand that I meant every word I was saying. David looked like he was struggling to breathe clearly, recognizing that his family was falling apart right in front of his eyes. "No more birthday gifts that you can accept without gratitude and complain about later to your friends. No more Christmas presents that aren't quite right because I obviously don't understand your sophisticated tastes. No more anniversary celebrations like this one, where I spend months planning a beautiful evening only to be publicly humiliated for my efforts." Harold had stood up and moved to stand beside me, placing his hand on my shoulder in a gesture of support that I desperately needed. His presence gave me the strength to continue delivering what felt like the most important speech of my life. "You talked about learning to appreciate guidance, Ashley, so let me give you one final piece of guidance that you're sure to appreciate. When David gets sick, don't call me for my chicken soup recipe. When you need someone to watch your house while you're traveling, don't think of us. When you want advice about marriage or parenting or any other aspect of adult life, you'll need to figure it out entirely on your own." I could see several of the guests nodding in approval, clearly feeling that Ashley had brought this consequence upon herself through her cruel and unnecessary public attack. David's best friend Marcus was looking at Ashley with obvious disapproval, and I noticed that Ashley's own colleagues seemed uncomfortable with her behavior. Most importantly, I continued building toward my final point. When you and David have children, someday don't expect me to be the grandmother who babysits every weekend, who teaches them family traditions, or who spoils them with love and attention. You've made it very clear that my involvement in your family is unwelcome, so I'll respect that boundary completely." This statement hit David like a physical blow, and he stood up abruptly, his face flushed with emotion. "Mom, please don't say that. I don't want things to be this way between our family." I looked at my son with all the love I could muster, feeling heartbroken that our family had reached this point, but knowing that I couldn't continue accepting disrespectful treatment for the sake of keeping peace. "David, sweetheart, I will always love you with every fiber of my being. You are my son, and nothing will ever change that. But I cannot and will not continue to subject myself to being treated like an unwelcome intruder in your life. Your wife has made her feelings about me abundantly clear, and I'm simply going to honor her wishes." I turned back to Ashley one final time, noting that she looked genuinely shocked by the consequences of her actions. You wanted independence from my involvement in your lives, Ashley. Congratulations. You've achieved complete independence. I hope it brings you everything you thought it would." With that, I handed the microphone back to Ashley, picked up my purse from our table, and walked toward the exit, with Harold right beside me. The room remained completely silent until we reached the door, and then I heard the sound of multiple conversations breaking out simultaneously as our guests began processing what had just occurred. The drive home passed in relative silence, with Harold occasionally reaching over to squeeze my hand as I stared out the window, processing everything that had just happened. Part of me felt devastated that our family celebration had ended in such dramatic fashion, but a larger part of me felt an incredible sense of relief that I had finally stood up for myself after years of accepting treatment that no one should have to endure. "I'm proud of you," Harold said quietly as we pulled into our driveway. "You handled that with more grace and dignity than Ashley deserved. She brought those consequences on herself through her own choices." The next few days were emotionally difficult as I adjusted to the reality of what had transpired. I felt sad about the breakdown of our family relationships, but I also experienced a surprising sense of freedom from no longer carrying the burden of trying to win Ashley's approval or acceptance. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't have to worry about whether my actions would be misinterpreted or criticized. David called on Wednesday evening, 3 days after the disastrous anniversary party. His voice was strained and tired as he told me that Ashley had been crying on and off since Sunday night, finally understanding that her public humiliation of me had serious and lasting consequences. "Mom, Ashley wants to apologize," David said hesitantly. "She realizes now that she was completely out of line, and she's hoping you might consider giving her another chance to start over." I listened to my son's plea with a heavy heart, recognizing how difficult this situation was for him, but knowing that I couldn't simply pretend the anniversary incident had never happened. "David, I love you more than words can express, and I always will. But Ashley made a choice to publicly humiliate me at an event I had spent months planning to honor your marriage. That wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a misunderstanding. That was a deliberate, calculated attack designed to embarrass me in front of people whose opinions matter to me. I know, Mom, and I'm not making excuses for her behavior, but people can change, and Ashley is genuinely sorry for what she did." I took a deep breath before responding, knowing that my next words would set the tone for any potential future relationship with my daughter-in-law. If Ashley is truly sorry and genuinely wants to rebuild our relationship, then she needs to understand that it will happen on completely different terms than before. I will not go back to walking on eggshells around her, pretending that her disrespectful treatment of me was somehow my fault. Over the following months, I focused on rediscovering aspects of my life that I had neglected while trying so hard to build a relationship with Ashley. Harold and I took a 2-week trip to Italy, something we had been talking about for years, but had never made time for because I was always worried about missing family gatherings or important events. We visited art museums, took cooking classes, and spent long evenings talking about our dreams for retirement without constantly analyzing family dynamics. I also reconnected with old friends whom I had somewhat neglected during the years when I was so focused on winning Ashley's acceptance. We started a monthly book club, began taking watercolor painting lessons together, and I remembered how fulfilling it could be to nurture relationships with people who actually wanted to spend time with me. David began visiting us alone on Sunday afternoons, and our relationship gradually returned to the natural warmth and easy communication we had shared before Ashley became part of his life. Without the tension of wondering how Ashley was interpreting every conversation, David and I could simply enjoy each other's company and talk about anything that came to mind. 6 months after the anniversary disaster, Ashley finally called me directly to request a face-to-face meeting. Her voice was subdued and respectful as she asked if I would be willing to meet for coffee to discuss the possibility of starting fresh. I agreed to the meeting, but I made it clear that any new relationship between us would need to be built on mutual respect and genuine appreciation rather than obligation or social expectation. When Ashley and I sat down together at the quiet coffee shop, she had suggested I was struck by how different she seemed from the confident, almost arrogant woman who had delivered that devastating toast 6 months earlier. She appeared genuinely remorseful as she apologized for her behavior and admitted that she had been threatened by my close relationship with David rather than grateful for the loving family she was marrying into. I realize now that I was interpreting your kindness as interference because I was insecure about my place in David's life, Ashley said quietly. I thought that if I could push you away, I would somehow become more important to him, but all I accomplished was hurting people I should have been grateful to know. I listened to her apology carefully, evaluating whether her words seemed genuine or were simply what she thought I wanted to hear. After several long conversations and small steps toward rebuilding trust, Ashley and I gradually developed a relationship based on clear boundaries and honest communication. She learned to appreciate my experience and wisdom without feeling threatened by them, and I learned to offer support without expecting it to be received in any particular way. Today, 3 years later, our family has found a healthy balance that works for everyone involved. Ashley and I will never have the close mother-daughter relationship I once hoped for, but we have developed genuine mutual respect and affection that feels authentic rather than forced. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to establish clear boundaries about what behavior you will and will not accept. The greatest lesson from this entire experience is that respect must be earned and maintained by all parties in any relationship. You cannot love someone into treating you well, but you can teach them how you expect to be treated by consistently demonstrating what you will and will not tolerate. Sometimes standing up for yourself requires difficult conversations and painful consequences, but the alternative is accepting treatment that diminishes your sense of self-worth and damages your relationships with everyone involved. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where family dynamics became toxic and you had to make difficult decisions about boundaries? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below about how you handled similar challenges in your own families. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more real-life family experiences. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to stand up for yourself even when it means risking important relationships. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you deserve to be treated with respect and kindness in every relationship in your life. May you find the courage to create the boundaries you need for your own peace of mind and happiness.